Recap of that breaking news we brought you just a moment ago. Russia saying it will annex 4 regions which had held referendums earlier this week. It says it will take control of those areas tomorrow. Meanwhile, the European Union and the U.S. are planning to impose more sanctions on Russia for holding what they call sham referendums in Ukraine. So the ballots were held in Russian-occupied parts of eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin-backed authorities there say the results show that people overwhelmingly voted to join the Russian Federation. Separatists reported huge margins of victory, saying that in the region of Luhansk, for example, 98% of voters favored annexation.
We do not accept the sham referendum and any kind of annexation in Ukraine. And we're determined to make the Kremlin pay for this further escalation. So we propose sweeping new import bans on Russian products. This will keep Russian products out of the European market and deprive Russia of an additional 7 billion euros in revenues. We're also proposing to extend the list of products that cannot be exported to Russia anymore. The aim is here to deprive the Kremlin's military complex of key technologies.
Well, there have been Russian strikes on several areas in eastern Ukraine over the last few days. Huda Abdelhamid is in Ukraine's central city of Dnipro. Huda, we'll talk about those strikes in a moment. But first on the news that Russia is now announcing that it will indeed annex 4 regions which held referendums earlier this week. Tell us more about that and what happens when they actually annex these areas.
Well, these 4 regions are Lugansk, which Russia holds nearly entirely, Donetsk, which it doesn't. It's estimated that Russia is now occupying about 60% of Donetsk, and then it occupies also half of Zaporizhia, another region further to the south, and Kherson, which also it's sort of, one would say, it has about 90% of that. Now, I don't think what is coming out of Russia today is any surprise for anyone here in Ukraine, because since before the referendum even started, anyone you would speak to would tell you that they know that the result has already been decided, and this is just a formality. Actually, one person coming out of Kherson told me that this was just a theater to show on the cameras. So Ukraine has been decrying that and saying that it is an illegal referendum. Fact is that on the ground, when it comes to Russia, it will say that those are now those 4 regions or parts of those regions are part of the Russian Federation. It means that it has another border with Ukraine, not only in the east of the country, next to Donetsk and Lugansk, but now also in the south of the country, bringing its border much closer to western Ukraine, much closer to where I am here in Dnipro, much closer to Kyiv, and it will also, in the way Russia is laying the ground, change the dynamic of this war, because now Russia is saying that if Ukraine attacks those regions, it will consider it an attack on Russian sovereign soil, and that would change the nature of the war. Now, people here have been following that very closely over the last 5 days, dismissing, yes, the results of the referendum as foregone, but also very worried about what could happen after, especially that there's talk about mobilization of young people, for example, in Zaporizhia and in Kherson, where anyone between the age of 18 and 35, young men, were not allowed out.
And Huda, just briefly tell us about the strikes that took place overnight where you are.
Well, certainly the airstrikes have increased over the past few days. We were in Kryvyi Rih last night. That is about 2 hours' drive from here. It's the hometown of President Volodymyr Zelensky. There's a grain depot that was hit there. Zaporizhia also had several airstrikes early morning. In Kharkiv last night there were strikes too, but definitely the deadliest one was here in Dnipro, where I'm standing. I'm just going to get you out. This is the crater of the impact, really, and it's about 10 meters deep. It completely flattened about 4 houses, and 60 more in the surroundings are quite damaged. Now, we do understand that there was a family living here, a family of 4. The body of 3 of them have been found. Some quite blown apart into pieces, and rescue workers were until very short while ago still looking for the body of a child who was somewhere there in this what is now a huge crater. I mean, we asked people around, it happened around 12:30 at night, but what is really, when you speak to people, what is really sort of touching is that how they are now kind of resilient to what is happening at the moment, and kind of worried about what's going to happen next after the celebration in Moscow about the annexation of these 4 regions. People are listening to President Vladimir Putin talking about nuclear attack. They wonder what that means. One man told me, there's nothing we can do. There is absolutely nothing we can do. If this is what one missile can
Right.
Make as a damage, what can we do if there is a nuclear attack? They take that in mind, they worry about it, and they're just waiting to see what's going to come out of Moscow, what's the next stage coming out of Moscow.
Thank you so much. Huda Abdelhamid reporting from Dnipro.